Welcome to Special Delivery, the February edition. My name is Judd Marcello, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of FarEye. And FarEye brings you Special Delivery. And we also bring you great guests from throughout the industry that are involved in supply chain, last mile delivery logistics, retailers, brands, e-commerce, you name it, we're bringing them to you. Now, last month in January, we had a really special guest. We had the editor-in-chief of Supply and Demand Chain Executive and Food Logistics, Marina Mayer, join us, and we're bringing her back this month. We had such a great time in the January episode. Actually, we ran out of time because we talked so much, but we brought her back in February to talk about trends in the industry. We're going to get to her in just a couple minutes. But first, just a few words on what we're doing here. So each month, check in here with us on Special Delivery, and we're going to talk about the trends and the hot topics that are happening with last mile delivery, supply chain, etc. We, FarEye, are a last mile delivery logistics company. We help brands, third-party logistics providers improve their last mile operations, improve their last mile logistics with technology. We help them make technologies their competitive advantage. So that's what we're all about. That's what we're going to talk about today. Today's episode is, I think it's a really special one for a couple of reasons. One, Marina's here again. But two, we're going to talk about what's happening with logistics providers. We're going to talk about where their focus and their priorities are. Look, we're in February. We're just a month and a half into the new year. And, this is just such a dynamic industry. Retailers came into it with some uncertainty. Logistics providers came into it this year with some uncertainty around macroeconomic factors and consumer demand and consumer spending. And so, they were taking a look at their business and thinking, how do we need to reprioritize for this year? What are the important KPIs for us as a business that we need to gear our business and our operations around? And how do we think about that? So there are some really interesting trends emerging. We're going to get into those. We're also FarEye is launching some new research today. We just put a global study together, talking to third-party logistics providers, talking to retailers, talking to e-com players, and we're asking them about what are they seeing from a consumer perspective, a market perspective, and what's important in their business in regards to creating cost efficiencies, better deliveries, and better delivery operations, better delivery logistics. We're releasing that research today. We're going to touch on it a couple times throughout our conversation, but look for some information in the scroll, look for some information in the comments, at how you can access this research right away and start to read it and then incorporate into what you're doing or ask us some more questions about it. So a lot of things happening today. It's going to be a good show. I want to start off in a way that we usually do, and that is our kind of rip from the headlines segment. And there's a couple articles that really caught my attention in the recent weeks. The first one is from DC Velocity. It is about the recent RELA show. The RELA show, lots of brands are there presenting, lots of businesses are up there talking about what's important in their world today and what's important in the market. What caught my eye was an American Eagle presentation. And in that presentation to the audience there, they talked about a few things. What they said was, look, what they're seeing from a consumer demand point of view, we're returning to pre-pandemic levels. So things shot up, they leveled off, and now we're back to kind of like where we were, okay, is what they're saying. So there's almost like a normalization in their business, but things aren't normal anymore. And they called out three specific things that they're focusing on and prioritizing in 2023. One of them was the role of technology in their business. Because of a lot of changes in companies right now when it comes to layoffs, trying to do more with less, trying to create more efficiencies, trying to maintain profit margins, some people have moved out of the business and they're being now replaced, if you will, by technology. Can technology create more efficiencies in the business? That is the number one priority for them. How do they bring more technology in to help them help their operations improve? The second thing is just changes to KPIs in general. What business levers were important pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic? Maybe there's a blend now, and they're starting to see that they need to be focusing on different KPIs to run their business differently going forward. And the last thing that they called out was different service models. How are they treating the customer today? Because what they said in the article was customer loyalty is up for grabs now. And they need to work extra hard to be able to service that customer in new and compelling ways that speak to customer needs. So those are kind of like three trends that we talked. We're going to dig into those, but those are three things that stood out to me from the RILA presentation that I thought were really valid and really topical for us today. The second article kind of plays on that as well. And this one comes from FreightWaves. FreightWaves recently kicked off their Global Supply Chain Week. They had a number of brands come in. One of them was FabFitFun. And one of their SVPs spoke there, their SVP of supply chain, global supply chain. And they spoke about very similar things, about how their business has had to evolve. When they did their 2023 planning, what were they thinking about? What were the key trends that they saw in the market? How did their business need to change from an operations standpoint, from a people standpoint, from a technology standpoint? Very similar. And the three questions that they asked themselves at the beginning of the year when they did their planning were, how do we increase efficiencies in the business, right? How do we utilize carrier networks? How do we get more agility and speed by outsourcing a lot of our delivery and deliveries and delivery needs and logistics? And then the last one was bringing down costs for shippers. How do they do that? So again, interesting here from a trend point of view that, business models are being disrupted as much as the market is being disrupted by a lot of these macroeconomic factors in a post-COVID kind of change. So I thought those were a great setup for the conversation that we're going to have with Marina today. And I want to bring Marina on now. And I want to pick up where we left off in January. Marina, for those that weren't with us in January here now, why don't you introduce yourself, tell people what you do, and then we'll dig in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me again, Judd. I appreciate this. I'm Marina Mayer. I'm the editor-in-chief of Supply and Demand Chain Executive and Food Logistics. And we cover a lot of these trends, especially last mile. So when Judd invited me back on, I was like, oh, well, where do I start? And I know we ran out of time the last time, so I'm assuming that's going to happen again.
Probably. That's great. We got another month coming, right?
Right?
We'll be all right. Look, again, thanks for being here. Yeah, look, I thought last time was really insightful. We got a lot of great feedback on the discussion around, kind of like what was happening in the industry from your point of view, which is really your audience's point of view. Let's continue with that. So when we ended last time, I think what we ran out of time for was trends in the industry. So let's pick up with trends. What are some of the most significant trends that you're starting to see right now as we turn the corner into this year and logistic providers are getting their feet underneath them?
So I think we're seeing many trends, but I think one of the core ones that I'd like to kick off with is the emphasis on the customer service experience. Okay. A lot of these last mile logistics providers are kind of changing their models a little bit. Mm-hmm. So they are trying to still meet that same day, next day delivery. But the customer service aspect of that is becoming more important. It's delivering the customer the product in full. Is the package ripped? Is it missing pieces? Does it fit? I'm a consumer and I order online and, I will tell you there are times I get the wrong product and I have to go back and look at what I ordered and I'm like, that's not right. So a lot of these companies, instead of saying, sorry, they're kind of extending themselves to make sure that these customers are happy and will return as customers, because we're now seeing how it's now in the customer's wheelhouse. They're kind of in charge a little bit more now.
Yeah. And do you see, so the service piece in one of the, I mentioned earlier in one of the articles, they said, customer loyalty is up for grabs.
Uh-huh.
Right? And I kind of love that statement. It's very provocative, right? It's a great marketing statement. But when we're thinking, when these businesses that you're speaking with or that you're seeing, changing their habits, when they're thinking about customer loyalty, like how far back up the decision-making process internally are they thinking about that? Like when they're developing those models internally, not just we want to make sure we get the return process right, but how do they think about changing what they do further back up the value chain when it comes to customer loyalty?
So that's a good question, because I'm not entirely sure how far back they're going, but this slide is important because it does kind of break down some key parts that are a part of that decision making. So sustainability is a big one. I know we talked about that in the last episode. Is packaging. companies are sending products and packaging, and sometimes it's two or three different boxes, and customers are kind of like, what do I do with all this? You're such a waste. The returns is a big thing because, we're now seeing companies just say, hey, sorry if it doesn't fit, just keep it, figure it out on your own. No need to send it back, because it's costing more for the companies to get it back to their warehouse. So I'm not entirely sure how far back it's going, but I do know that some of these even larger companies are paying more attention to it and putting investment in the areas that it needs to provide that additional, customer service experience, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't have firsthand experience how far it goes back, but even if you look at this slide, and what this slide does, it breaks down logistic providers, how they're thinking about improving customer service, to your point. And what's really interesting here, these KPIs, right? I'm sure that every company has some kind of metric that they hold themselves to around each of these things. It's all funny how a lot of these are so back end, right? There's things that the customer never sees, but they materialize in a significant way when it comes to what the customer receives, right? So even if you look at things like you mentioned, package and sustainability. Sustainability, you can go a couple different ways. The packaging that somebody gets in their hand that's tangible, right? Or how they utilize fleets and how many trucks are on the road at a given time, right? Impacting the environment. Capacity utilization, visibility and tracking, average delivery time. I think this really speaks to what some of the quick comments I made about the articles that we started off with, because this is how those improvements get made in logistics. This is how the efficiencies are made. This is how profitability is maintained. And this is also how, customer satisfaction is impacted. So I don't know how far back it goes either, but I think what the data shows us here, and again, this is from the recent research that we did, is that, throughout the entire continuum of thinking about delivery logistics to getting that package to somebody's door, there's opportunity to create efficiencies.
Absolutely. And I think something we also need to keep in mind, something that we published on our site on sdcexec.com earlier this week, is how logistics companies have been told to brace for kind of a cooling of a demand. So now we're kind of seeing the turn of events. It's post holidays, but people still purchase online very heavily. But there's, the core consumer group that's just been burned too many times. And so now they're reverting away from ordering online. And so these providers have been told, just watch out. You're not going to be filling as many containers. You're not going to be filling your trucks as much. You're not going to be making as many trips. And that's something for us to kind of keep an eye on, because that will kind of skew how this goes going forward, because now they kind of have to shift backwards again, repivot.
This is interesting. Okay. So I kind of what I heard from that, Marina, is that because of maybe poor experience from an e-com delivery standpoint, consumers are now saying, hey, I'm over that. Yeah, sure, I'll do it when I need to for convenience. I haven't totally given up on buying something online, having it delivered. But look, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to go to the store because I want to remove the friction. That's a very interesting development. You're hearing about more of that.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's specific companies. I mean, how many times can you order from the same company and be screwed over before you're like, I'm done. You've really screwed me over. And customers, they're king sometimes. They're always right, correct? And so at this point, they're going to kind of say and dictate what happens next by their purchasing powers and how they spend that money and where they're going. I don't know how quickly it will happen, but it's something that's been kind of talked about amongst some of our industry experts when they produce some columns for us, and it's called the slowing of demand. Be prepared.
The slowing of demand, and it's interesting what you're saying, because that demand, I find this topic interesting. The slowing of demand, even the way we're talking about it now, can slice and dice in different ways. E-commerce demand, which means less deliveries. It doesn't necessarily mean like consumer demand for your product in store per se.
Correct.
But that kind of shift is that's something to keep an eye on, because it creates opportunities, doesn't it? That customer loyalty is up for grabs. So, nobody's going to abandon e-commerce, but now your competitive advantage absolutely can be to deliver a superior e-commerce service. Like when everybody was just doing it before, and you maybe tolerated some of the poor experience elements because it was the only way to get something for a period of like almost 24 months, so to speak, the only way. Now the opportunity for providers and retailers is just overwhelm them with great customer service.
Absolutely. Give them a reason to come back, so that they don't get in their car and drive somewhere else.
Got it. And so again, on the service piece, like what else are you seeing, like the actual like components of a service that, you know, trends that you're seeing like that are impacting consumers when they get deliveries? Anything else that's standing out for you?
So I'm seeing a lot of these, especially these big box retailers, offer pickup from your home. They'll come and they'll pick up the product, especially if it's a bigger item. They'll come and they'll pick it up for your charge. You just have to print out the label and repackage it and just put it on your front porch. We actually did that over the weekend. That's why I bring it up, because I was floored that was even an option. We bought the wrong mattress for my son, and I was like, how am I going to return this? It doesn't fit my car. You know, it's like a whole, like, what do we do kind of a thing. And there was an option for you to just roll it up, put it in the box, and put it on the front porch. And I was like, oh, done.
Wow.
And I will now forever be a customer of that retailer, because that just made my day. So it's providing alternative options that may cost the company a little bit more to make happen, because now they're sending a driver out to my house that maybe wasn't supposed to be coming out to my house, but I'm coming back for more. So in the long term, the ROI is there. So I'm seeing a little bit more of that happen, which is the convenience factor for customer service.
It is. And I think this just goes back to what we said before. You know, if there's a current shortfall in the experience, like unsatisfactory experience, you know, whoever it is, that retailer you work with right now, you know, that could be top of mind for them to say, we're going to step in and over deliver again and start to win that customer right now. Yeah, I think that's a really strong play. Now, look, let's move from a trend on customer service and service models. Let's go back to the all important costs, right? Everybody is trying to cut costs down. Everybody is trying to become more efficient, and there are different ways that they can be done. What are you seeing from your research and from your vantage point of trends around efficiency and cost cutting?
So it's funny, because every day I feel like it's different. It's like the discussion about eggs. Are eggs good for you? One day they are, and the next day they're not. And that's kind of what I'm seeing with costs. One day we're, you know, gonna head to, you know, the inflation is high, and we're gonna, you know, everything's gonna go up. And then the next day, everything's like leveled out. I think this slide is especially interesting because the fuel costs obviously will always be something of significant importance to this industry, and is a big deal breaker for a lot of these companies when they're kind of redoing their models. You know, labor is still obviously an issue, but I think what's funny about this is it's not funny, but interesting, is the returns process, because that's the line item on a lot of these models that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but actually really can put a company in the red if they're not careful. And so I think that's an important part that companies need to kind of pay attention to is the returns process. How much money are you spending taking an item back and then funneling it back through the system, especially when we have high fuel costs and labor issues?
Yeah, you know, I would agree with you. I think the returns piece is interesting. Now, I'll take it a little further. And again, this is from our research that we're launching today. So you'll be able, attendees today and anybody else be able to pick this up after the show. I think what you're saying is an interesting piece here, the returns. I agree with you. That is a major cost, major contributor to high costs or a cost that you need to be leery of. But when you look at this chart here, you kind of see returns. You know, first delivery failure. Some of these things are within your control, just from how you satisfy the customer. Like, just get these things right. Like, let's make sure that we get the right orders to them. Or maybe on the consumer side, they order the wrong thing. Are there ways that you can help make sure that they order the right thing at the point of checkout? Like, you know, to kind of really reinforce you getting the right thing. There's going to be some returns that are going to happen, but when there are returns based on errors that you could have helped the customer avoid, that you could avoid yourself, that's like a self-inflicted wound.
Absolutely.
And the more self-inflicted wounds that you can prevent, the better. The other thing here, like fuel costs, it's always going to be a challenge. And sometimes that's just predicated on like gas prices and oil prices. Right. Those are macroeconomic factors. But even labor, address location, routing, right? Lost package. I think this is what the other articles were talking about, the role of technology, okay? Bringing in technology to help improve delivery logistics is a way to drive costs down, right? Is a way for you to get more control of your business and then ultimately create a really positive knock-on effect when it comes to customer satisfaction and customer service. So, I don't think any of this really surprises me. I think more than anything, it probably concerns me that we're still seeing these areas as high cost concerns from businesses, right? Like there's going to be a continual effort to kind of drive down these costs, and brands, third-party logistics, businesses are looking for solutions to eliminate these costs as best as possible, or to get them under control. Because right now, cost efficiency, hey, look, we're a technology provider. We speak to a lot of brands. We're hearing like this is like the number one thing: help us drive costs down. Help us drive costs down. And if we drive costs down, that'll allow us to focus on customer success and customer service, and it will have better loyalty. Like it's really where things start. That's what we're seeing.
Right. Well, and it's all intermixed. I mean, the address location is interesting because, I'm always looking at our neighborhood Facebook, and there's always a package that's dropped off at the wrong house.
Yeah.
And the company's like, well, I don't know. I took a picture. I don't know what to tell you. Well, now it's a customer service problem because you're not going to go out of your way to help this customer. Yeah. They've called the number, they're trying to get it, and the company's like, I'm sorry. There's technologies out there to solve a lot of these problems, but it's also streamlining. It's going backwards into your own system, into your own program, and finding where those gaps are and finding out where those where you're incurring the most costs. Are you every year or every month sending out the wrong package? Maybe it's the person that's doing it. Maybe it's your technology. Maybe it's lack of technology. Yeah. So like you said, they're shooting themselves in the foot because there are resolutions out there on the market, and there's companies and consultants who are also willing to kind of dive in and help. So there's solutions everywhere. Companies just need to kind of take that time to fill in the gaps.
I would agree. And, you just made me think, I'm going to draw a parallel here. It's not a one-to-one, but, just even thinking about technology in general, it's been a rough few months for technology, right? The industry and companies within. I was thinking about Meta, and Mark Zuckerberg at a recent earnings call talked about this year being the year of efficiency for Facebook. Okay. Now we don't need to get into what that means and how much money he's wasted on, whatever his flight of fancy is. But what was interesting was during that call, as he was talking about efficiency, or post that call, like Meta saw a massive spike in their stock price. So like, whether it's the market demand, your shareholder demand for creating efficiency, your executive team driving it, your board driving it, everybody is focused on efficiency this year. I think some of these factors here are going to continue to be problems for people until they find the right solution, be it third parties, be it technology, or just being more mindful of how they run their business.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Companies just need to kind of look at and analyze their supply chains a little bit more.
Yep. Okay. We got a few minutes left. Let's go. I'm gonna have it be guest choice. Okay. A couple of the areas I'm interested in trends on are fulfillment, different fulfillment types that we're seeing, and or sustainability. Like,
I like sustainability.
What's the hot topic for you? What do you want to hit on?
So I like sustainability because sustainability, not just because it's a near and dear topic to my heart, but because I feel it's one of those topics that regardless of what's going on in the world, companies still put it in the top of their initiatives. They make it happen regardless of what's going on in the world. And that's why I love sustainability.
Yeah. Now, okay, so what are you hearing about sustainability? What are some of the core trends that are coming across your radar?
So the net zero carbon footprint, everybody's aiming towards that. I know that there's a lot of talks overseas about some companies that operate overseas. They have to fill certain mandates. And so those companies who have operations in the US are filtering those back to the US to make it more company-wide. I know California is putting their foot down on a lot of stuff. We're seeing a lot more electrification coming up in the trucking. It's not as widespread yet. I think a lot of companies are kind of dipping their toes, but it's definitely something to kind of keep an eye on. And I think the overall packaging in terms of reverse logistics is something that a lot of companies are starting to really keep an eye on, because when COVID hit and everything was being shipped, they were just throwing them in boxes and calling it a day. And now customers are starting to speak up and say, well, this isn't even recyclable. And you sent it in like 5 different packages. And it's, look at all this extra space. So sustainability, I think, is something to keep an eye on. And carbon footprint overall throughout a company just makes best sense. And you do help bring some of your costs when you do some of these changes.
Yeah. One of the things that you touched on there was electric vehicles. And I think we had one more stat from the research that we wanted to share today. Maybe if we could throw that one up there. In our survey, we talked to, so I'm cheating a little bit. I'm also going to incorporate fulfillment into this. But, when we talk to the businesses that we talk to around the globe, we ask them, what are you considering in the future when it comes to technology in your fleet and fulfillment? Like what's on your radar? And overwhelmingly electric vehicles, people are really thinking about electric vehicles, as a way to, to support sustainability efforts, to be environmentally conscious. And honestly, it's like, that's where the market is going. And I think, to cut down on fuel costs more than anything. I mean, when you think about fuel costs being the number one thing they need to solve and electric vehicles being high on their list, there's certainly a correlation there. There's, that's not a coincidence. But I think also too, it does satisfy that sustainability objective that each of these companies has. One of the funny parts about electric vehicles, and I think this is from a consumer standpoint, it's pretty much the same thing. Just infrastructure. Right. You really need the infrastructure, especially when you're thinking about routing and delivery. It's not necessarily as easy to pull up to a recharging station, somewhere along the highway, just for a car. I think you really got to think about if electric vehicles is going to be a big part of your fleet going forward, you do need the resources, maybe even from a technology standpoint, to help you mitigate some of those potential gaps that you might have in getting someplace and not having enough juice to do it.
Oh, absolutely. And on SDCexec.com earlier this week also, the White House just revealed this program for infrastructure. They created the Made in America Electric Vehicle Charging Network. And it's basically providing this national network for these EV chargers along all the US highways. And it's for the trucks. It's for the big long hauls and even the short hauls that have to get onto a highway super quick to get to the next town. So that there are charging stations along the highway, so they don't have to go back to their warehouse or go back to the charging station at whatever distribution center they are. This is going to be a game changer for this specific mode of transportation going forward. So those numbers, I think, will continue to go up once this becomes more fruition.
Yeah, maybe we'll start seeing some of these 3PLs who bring lobbyists onto their team.
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful because at least there's options. So for the 80% that want to dabble into it, here's some options for you.
Yeah, and I think electric vehicles, obviously not something that people can address right away in terms of a immediate, long-term, sustainable, pardon the pun, solution. Until some of these bigger picture factors get corrected or advanced upon, like the infrastructure piece. But I think kind of what we heard a little bit today was things you can do today, but things you also need to be working on today for the future. And that's really important because it's just such a dynamic industry. And as we've learned in the last 18 months, 3 years, change can happen pretty fast, right? And it can be a roller coaster ride. Marina, we're pretty much out of time again. Before we go, I want to just give you a moment. What's happening with your publications? Is there anything exciting that coming up that you have that we should be looking out for?
Yes, actually, because we talked about 3PL on our food logistics site, foodlogistics.com. We have nominations open for our top 3PL and cold storage providers awards. That's pretty cool. We're going to announce our Pros to Know winners next month at ProMat. We are going to open up soon, hopefully finalizing the dates for our upcoming Women in Supply Chain Forum, and look for the nominations for the Women in Supply Chain Award to open up in April. So a lot going on, but a lot of exciting stuff, and I'm excited to be a part of this industry. So
yeah, fantastic. Well, look, we're excited to be connected to you.
Absolutely.
So, look, what we'll do is in probably in LinkedIn on the show page, let's get some links to some of the things you talked about. So we can share those with our audience. Would love to do that. Get some exposure for that. And look, again, a couple months in a row, thanks for being here. Well worth my time. I enjoyed it, and I think our audience will too. So we'll do it again sometime in the future.
Absolutely, I would love it.
Okay. Thanks, Marina. And thanks to everybody that attended this episode of Special Delivery. It was a good show. We're going to continue to bring more exciting guests on. We're going to bring more insightful data. And again, data, we just launched that research today. So I noticed in our comment section that we provided links to the new research report. I encourage you to tap on that link, download that research, and then get back to us with any questions or comments that you might have. You can do that on our LinkedIn page on FarEye, or you can come to fareye.com and leave us a comment or ask us a question, and we'll be there for you. Okay, thanks everybody, and we'll see you again in March.